Welcome to episode 144 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's March 24, 1965. Rotterdam, De Kuip. And today's story is about the night football ran out of football. Because on this day 1965, Liverpool and Köln still could not be separated after a third match and 300 total minutes in the European Cup, and the tie had to be settled by the toss of a wooden chip. And even that refused to cooperate at first. But how did we get here? This was the meeting of two champions, but also of two very different football histories. Liverpool were the older institution, founded in 1892, heavy with English football tradition, and already six-time champions of England by the summer of 1964. But this was not just old Liverpool. This was Bill Shankly's Liverpool. The great rebuilding job was well underway. As we talked about in episode 31, Shankly had arrived in 1959, found the club in the second division, won promotion in 62, and by 64 had turned Liverpool back into champions of England. Köln were newer, but no less ambitious. Erste FC Köln had only been formed in 1948, out of the merger of Kölner BC 01 and Spielvereinigung Sülz 07. It was a post-war club for a post-war Germany, and under the forceful presidency of Franz Kremer, it embraced professional structures earlier and more seriously than most of the German game. The rise was quick. German champions in 62, and then in 63-64, winners of the very first Bundesliga. So this was not some quaint mismatch. It was reigning English champions against reigning West German champions, an old club against a young club that had modernized faster than most. And, hovering in the background, England against West Germany a year before the World Cup final at Wembley would harden that national football rivalry still further. Both had come into the 64-65 European Cup as clubs with real momentum. Liverpool had swept through KR Reykjavik 11-1 on aggregate, then removed Anderlecht 4-0 over two legs. They were not playing perfect football domestically. The league title defense had turned uneven, but they were still alive on multiple fronts and still carried Shankly's sense of upward motion. Köln had advanced less noisily, but no less effectively. They drew 0-0 away to Partizani Tirana and beat them 2-0 at home. Then they drew 1-1 with Panathinaikos in Athens and won 2-1 in Cologne. In the Bundesliga, they were not as dominant as in the inaugural season, but they were still one of the strongest sides in the country and would go on to finish runners-up. And the clubs themselves already said something about where football was going. Liverpool were tradition, made modern by genius. Köln were modernity, built deliberately from the ruins of war. And then the tie began. The first leg was played in Cologne on February 10, 1965, and it finished 0-0. That score tells only part of the story. Köln were the more assertive side. Karl-Heinz Thielen hit the post, and Liverpool were happy enough to leave Germany without damage. Shankly's team were disciplined, experienced, and hard to open. The Germans had more of the initiative, but no breakthrough. So the whole thing moved to Anfield for the second leg. Except it didn't. The return was scheduled for March 3rd, and then snow took over. The pitch was covered, the stadium was already packed, and the match was called off shortly before kickoff. That delay mattered because it added another layer of irritation and another week of waiting to a tie that already felt stubborn. When the teams finally did meet at Anfield on March 17, the scoreboard remained blank again. Another 0-0. This time the pattern reversed. Liverpool pressed. Köln defended magnificently. Their goalkeeper Toni Schumacher was outstanding, and their backline with Wolfgang Weber and Matthias Hemmersbach stood up to sustain pressure. The result was that after 180 minutes, the champions of England and West Germany still had produced no separating goal at all. And because there were no away goals rule yet, and no penalty shootouts yet, the rules demanded something that now feels almost medieval. A replay on neutral ground. UEFA had to choose the venue. Liverpool preferred Glasgow. Köln preferred Rotterdam. So UEFA chose Rotterdam. That mattered too. The Kuip was much closer for Köln, and the Germans arrived with a strong following. And now we arrive at March 24. 2 matches, no goals, 1 postponement, all tension. So when the replay finally produced goals, it felt as if a locked door had suddenly burst open. Liverpool struck first. In the 21st minute, Ian St. John put them at head. In the 36th, Roger Hunt made it 2-0. At last, after all that deadlock, this looked like release. It looked like Liverpool had finally broken the thing open. It looked like the funnel had narrowed and was now pointing toward a clear end. Except this tie did not want a clear end, because Köln had a problem, and a simple, all at once. Wolfgang Weber had been injured in the build-up to the first Liverpool goal. That damage turned out to be a broken fibula. But this was 1965. No substitutions. Köln had to choose between finishing effectively shorthanded or sending Weber back out. So they sent him back out. That image belongs in football's old museum of hardness and madness. A central defender with a broken leg, back on the field because the team had no other option and because the night was too big to leave. Liverpool, understandably, took advantage while Köln were disordered. That's how 2-0 arrived. But incredibly, Köln began to turn the night around. Just before halftime, Karl-Heinz Thielen headed one back, 2-1, and suddenly the whole replay changed tone, because after 2 goalless matches, a 2-goal lead had felt enormous. Now it felt fragile. Then 3 minutes into the second half, Hannes Löhr equalized, 2-2, and now the tie had become something else again. Not Liverpool's breakthrough, not Köln's collapse, but a third act worthy of the first 2. Weber, incredibly, stayed out there. Because of the injury, he was moved upfield, where he could contribute more by standing, battling, and occupying space than by trying to defend as normal. The match turned chaotic, emotional, and increasingly bitter. Köln felt aggrieved by refereeing decisions, including a disallowed Heinz Hornig goal they believed should have counted. Liverpool felt the strain of having gone from apparent command back to uncertainty. The pitch worsened, the bodies tired, and the game thickened into mud and nerves. And still nobody won. The remaining minutes of normal time passed, no winner. Then 30 minutes of extra time passed, too, and without goals, which meant the funnel kept narrowing. The first match had not settled it. The second match needed rescheduling and also didn't settle it. A replay at neutral venue had not settled it. And extra time had not settled it. 300 minutes, nothing. So now football handed the tie over to chance. Referee Robert Schaut gathered the captains and produced not the modern metal coin of popular retelling, but in the version most often preserved in German accounts, a small wooden disc with red and white sides. Liverpool were assigned red, Köln white. Schaut tossed it, and then, as if the football gods themselves intervened, the wooden chip landed upright in the muddy turf, stuck on its edge in a divot. And as if even luck refused to decide this tie, so the chip had to be tossed again. Up it went once more, down it came. Red. Liverpool were through. Not by away goals, not by penalties, not by a winning goal in open play, but by red on a wooden chip on the second attempt after the first had literally refused to fall. So what? Well, in the immediate sense, Liverpool advanced and Köln went out. That's the plain outcome. Liverpool moved on to the semi-finals of the European Cup, where they would face Internazionale and lose a fierce controversial tie over 2 legs. But the broader arc of Liverpool's rise was not interrupted. Quite the opposite. A month later, Shankly's team won the FA Cup for the first time in club history. In '66, they were champions of England again. And in the decades that followed, Liverpool grew into one of the defining club powers in world football. Köln's story was different. In the short term, they were widely treated not as disgraced losers, but as something closer to moral victors. They had come back from 2-0 down. They had done it with Weber broken. They had pushed the reigning English champions through every imaginable layer of uncertainty. But the longer arc was harsher. Köln finished second in the Bundesliga that season, and then drifted out of the very top tier of German dominance. Not forever. That part matters. Because Köln did come back. In the late 1970s and early 80s, they were again major protagonists. A league and cup double in '78, more runners-up finishes, another DFB Pokal in '83, then the UEFA Cup final in '86. But if you compare the trajectories from Rotterdam onward, the split is obvious. On the night itself, the 2 clubs did not feel worlds apart. One was older, one was newer, but both were champions, both were serious, and both could look each other in the eye. After '65, Liverpool's climb kept becoming larger and more international. Köln's success became more periodic, more regional, more intermittent. That does not make Köln small, but it makes Liverpool exceptional. And then there's one more beautiful detail here. These clubs have never met again in a competitive match. Just those 3 games in 6 weeks. Just one absurd quarterfinal. Just that one tie that took 300 minutes and a second toss of a wooden chip to decide. So before we go, 3 things to take away from March 24, 1965. First, this was a collision of champions and of football models. Old Liverpool remade by Shankly, and young Köln built with post-war ambition and early professionalism. And second, the match itself kept refusing closure. 2 goalless legs, a postponed return, a 2-2 replay, extra time, and then even the deciding toss landing on its edge. And third, the night became a fork in 2 club histories. Liverpool kept rising into one of the great powers of the European game. Köln remained important, proud, and capable of revival, but never again travelled on quite the same trajectory. On this day, 1965, Liverpool and 1. FC Köln played 300 minutes across 3 matches, could not settle the European Cup quarterfinal with football, and finally watched the wooden chip decided only on the second toss. The night chance had to do the job, the game itself couldn't. That's all for episode 144 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by a 17 Lost Guy. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a 5-star rating, and share it with a fellow football historian. Tomorrow, we go to March 25, 1934, when Italy became the only World Cup host that had to qualify for its own tournament. They beat Greece and left behind one of the earliest clouds of suspicion in World Cup history, including a return leg that never happened. See you tomorrow.